I want to, first of all, just thank Mike Ewell and Jeremy Holden. Jer's our crayfish biologist, and Mike Ewell's our Chinook assessment biologist. And the two of them were scheduled to come last week, but with the weather, they couldn't make it. Mike's under the weather, and I think Jer's a ref, so I think he's skating around tonight, ref in the hockey game. So we'll, Colin and I will do the best to do this justice. So what are we going to talk about here? We're going to focus tonight on Chinook salmon and alewife, but just to remind us, we've got a really diverse fishery out there. Some of the predator issues will still be important for these species. Many of these species are more flexible in their diet. Chinooks would rather die, it seems, than eat anything but an alewife. They'll eat other fish, but they're basically, the relationship between Chinook and alewife is rock solid. Steelhead and coho and browns and lake trout and Atlantic, they'll eat gobies, they'll eat bugs, they'll eat emerald shiners, whatever. So you'll find a lot more diversity in them. They're okay if those alewife aren't there. They'll go find something else to eat. Chinook salmon, not so much. And that's why that relationship's so important, and we have to pay attention to it. So I'm just going to talk about a bit of management context. We're going to talk about the status of the alewife. I'm going to jump to the sort of the results of the alewife, then I'll back out a bit and talk a little bit about how we do the survey. So if you've got questions about how we did the survey, it's coming. And then we'll talk about the status of Chinook salmon. We're going to maybe have a conversation about why we're seeing smaller Chinooks this year. Would everybody agree we saw smaller Chinooks this year?
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll maybe talk a bit about why that might be and whether we need to be concerned about that. So just to remind us, we manage the lake with New York State through the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission. We can't do it. We can't do our work without the USGS, the CAHO, and the folks out of Oswego. Lots of partners involved. A lot of people behind some of this information that I'm going to be showing you. There's two signatories, Ontario and New York. There's a joint strategic plan. There's a management framework, and we have these things called fish community objectives for Lake Ontario. And the ones that are most important for us tonight are the ones for the pelagic zone, and I'm just highlighting two. Our first objective is maintaining that trophy Chinook salmon fishery. It goes on to talk about accounting for, through stocking, accounting for wild production. So it talks about that in the objective document. And then the other one is maintaining predator-prey balance, because we can't have that if we don't have our crayfish. There's two key indicators related to that. One is the growth and condition of Chinook salmon. Are we still seeing nice, big, robust fish? And the other one is the status of prey fish through our crayfish calls. So we look at those two indicators to see if what kind of shape we're in. Also, it's good to remind us, while we're talking about kings and we're talking about alewife, we're really talking about the whole cycle from sunlight to nutrients to phytoplankton, which alewife eat, to the alewife, to the Chinook salmon. We're going to basically be talking about this, but obviously this component here impacts us. We've got to consider that as well. Some of the concerns we've got right now and some of the issues we're facing right now are not necessarily because of this. Those two hard winters that we had back to back, 13, 14, 14, 15, pounded the alewife, and so we had two pretty poor year classes back to back, which created a gap in the system. It wasn't because we've got a nutrient issue, we don't think. We're not talking Lake Huron. We're not talking about a big downturn in nutrients. We're talking about a kick in the pants from some two bad back-to-back years and some recovery that we have to get on that. So we'll talk about that relationship, but we're not too concerned at this point. It's something that we always need to be thinking about, but it's really not the issue today. Alewife for driving the fishery. There's lots of other bait fish out there, emerald shiners and gobies and sculpin, but for our trout and salmon fishery, they're driving it, and they're driving the walleye fishery in Bay of Quinte. I mean, these big walleye go out in the eastern basin and they eat alewife. Incidentally, that's Jared Holden right there. He's our crayfish biologist. That's Jim Hoyle. He's our walleye biologist. And this is John Chiquin. He's our vessel master. So all our staff are out there. We're fishing. So I just found their photos from the library.
We're not being paid.
No, they're off the clock. They're off the clock. So here's the status. We had a couple of bad cold winters. It's left us with a kind of the messed up age class structure. There's relatively few age classes out there. We had great alewife reproduction in 2016. We had that really mild winter, 2016. We didn't really even have ice for ice fishing. And we had great alewife survival through the winter. And we were pretty happy seeing that in 2017 because we measured them at age 1. However, at age 2, when we went out and looked for them last year, the survival was lower than expected. So it looks like, you know, Chinooks may have put the hurt on them, may have eaten a few. So there's less than what we had expected to see. Still a good showing. I'll show you some graphs here in a second. In 2018, the adult alewife population consists mainly of those age 2 fish from 16, age 3s and 4s, with some age 7 fish from 2012. We're really missing those age 5 and 6 alewife, which are sort of the big max out there for the trout and salmon to eat. In recent years, the estimates of alewife biomass, and this is sort of gets towards the end of the presentation, when you start looking at how many kilograms are in the lake for the Chinook to eat, the total of it available for predators has been ticking down. It's getting closer to the estimates of what the Chinook eat in the first place. So there's some estimates out there from the scientists that say how many alewife kilograms does the Chinook population need, and those estimates range, and the available biomass is starting to get towards that number. So that's not a good thing. So we'll talk a bit about that as we go along here. So just to get it clear in our mind, when we talk about alewife and age classes and young of the year and whatnot, this picture is from later in the summer. These fish here, these are alewife, they would be young of the year, and they would be, you know, 3 to 4 centimeters, 2, 3, 4, lots of different size classes. This fish could have come out late in the season. They hatch in late June into July, then they grow quickly through the summer, and they get to about this size by the fall. This would be an age 1, so that's a fish that's been through the winter and survived to age 1. And then once you get to age 2, there's lots of overlap. You can get a 5-inch alewife and a 6-inch alewife that are 3 years apart. But it's like me, I'm a tall guy and I'm thin, and you can be my height and you'd be a lot heavier. So you get deep-bodied alewife, you can get smaller alewife, very similar in length, but a lot of big difference in calories. And we'll talk a bit about that as well. A 2-year-old alewife is, it takes like 2.5 2-year-olds to make up the meal of a 4-year-old alewife. You got to eat like 2.5 times and spend the energy to get it. So it's like you're on a diet of rice cakes or something. So you know, all alewife are not the same. And when we talk about year classes, this is what we're talking about in relative size. You should see these showing up in steelhead stomachs. Steelhead love these. They're higher in the water column in the late summer. You start getting lots of little alewife, you go to those little spoons, and you'll start seeing these fish showing up in the fall as well. So you've probably seen these graphs. I'm just going to show you the last 3 years. These are the results of the whole lake binational survey. We have 3 boats running at once. I'll talk a bit about that in a second, and we're doing about 200 trawls on the lake. So you're going to follow a year class. So the year classes stay the same color all the way through. They just get a year older. So here's the fish from 2015, and they were age 1 in 2016. And then the next year, they were age 2, and the next year they were age 3. So as you get older, you get less. You're getting eaten all the time. Very difficult to get more fish later in life unless we've missed them in the survey. These were that 2016 year class as age 1. So they would have been born this year. We measure them this year as age 1 coming out of the winter, because it's all about how they survive the winter. There's no point measuring a young of the year fish in the fall, because you don't know what the winter's going to be like. They're like deer, right? If you're a deer, it's like you have a rough winter, it's hard on the fawns. So it's hard on the youngest fish. So we measure them as age 1. So we saw this, and we were pretty excited. That's what we saw this year. These fish growing out less, and we see these as age 1s coming in behind. So what you see now is an age structure of, for this year, we saw some age 1s, age 2s, some age 3s, some age 4s, and these are the age 7 fish from way back in 2012. If you're looking for the red and the blue, you saw some here, not so much. Little bit of 2013 year class, really no 2014 year class. It really never showed up. That's the 2012 year class that held our fishery up for so long. We had a really good year class in 2012, and it really sustained that Chinook fishery, and it's still holding on. Alewife will live 9, 10 years. The oldest alewife I think we found this year was 7 or 8 in the surveys, but we've seen 9-year-old alewife in the lake itself. Not so much in some of the upper lakes. Alewife usually don't get that old. They get eaten before they can get to that age. They start spawning at about age, well, it's debatable, but age 3 for sure, maybe 2, but by 3 they're hitting their stride. So just to unpack this a bit, that's that 2016 year class. They were age 1s, age 2s there. That's the crop we got from 2017 that we went out and looked at. There'll be less of those this year coming. It was below average. We can't make that up. 2014 year class is almost gone. And the 2012 and 13 year class, they're likely getting hit hard by Chinooks, because Chinooks like those bigger alewives. So they're going to seek them out, and they're going to eat them. And then if they can't get them, they're going to go after the smaller ones. So this is an important slide. So this slide, I'm going to unpack it for you. These dots here are the old alewife surveys that were only the USGS New York side of the lake. Before we had a whole lake survey, these were estimates of biomass. So these are kilograms of alewife in the lake on this side, and it was bouncing around. And that survey was US waters only. And what we found when we went out, and you'll see in a couple slides, is that fish can really isolate on one side of the lake or the other. You can miss them. And so it's important to have the whole lake covered. These are the results of the lake-wide assessment, all vessels included. So biomass was here in 16, we dropped in 17, this year it was 18, probably being held up by those 2-year-olds putting on more weight. Because you might have less fish, but you can have more biomass as they get bigger. The next slide, next is going to show you what the estimates are. So the biologists, Brian Weidel at USGS, Mike Connerton at New York DEC, and Jeremy Holden, and some others, started to model what they think is going to happen to alewife in the future. The further you go out in your predictions, the more variance you're going to get, because it all depends on the weather and recruitment. But next year's pretty easy to estimate. So they think 95% certain alewife biomass is going to look about like that. If we get a real bad winter or they put the herd on them, it could be a low here, it could go up to here. The next year it could be like this, the next year it could be like this. If we want to get back up into here, we need some good recruitment, we need some real mild winters, we need to pull off a couple of back-to-back year classes to start to rebuild that. But generally they're pretty confident that we're going to more or less stay the same within that biomass of where we are today, until we start seeing some really good recruitment coming on. You know, these predictions down here, we get, you get surprised. Now, the concern for the managers is this is the estimate, this pink line. There was a paper written by Murray and a number of other authors, Mike Connerton from DEC was one of them. They put an estimate of the total amount of biomass at Chinook, and it's within this range here. And it's only Chinook. It wasn't accounting for lake trout, steelhead, and all the other fish. So the line, whether the line's here or here, we're getting close. We're starting to get connected between the amount of food that's on the table and the amount that Chinook are eating. And you can't eat all the alewife because you need some base population to spawn and carry on the population. So it just starts to put things in context, and that's why New York and Ontario were concerned enough to take some action, which I'll talk about in a minute.